thrilled to be channeling my inner Carl Sagan today, guys. We're going to be talking about exploration of space, keeping it fascinating, interesting. It's exploring it with the pioneers who invented rockets, who predicted space travel and worked with actual, in a lot of cases, were actual scientists themselves. So, we're going to be joined today by Carl Sagan. Once again, going to help us out. And I'm real pumped about this one, so let's get you guys relaxed, or just use this to tune out some noise or whatever while you're doing something hopefully more productive. But if not, at least you'll learn a thing or two about where we're headed as a species. So at first I was going to have this from the typical book angle, so you guys could see it like that, but I don't know, I feel like I could convey my excitement for this topic better with my eyes and hand motions this way, I guess. Let's get started. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Goddard Space Flight Center. Where is that? I think that's the one in Texas. But it's named after this gentleman right here. No, I guess I was wrong. The Goddard Space Flight Center is in Maryland. So the opening page shows this really cool image here. I'm trying not to have the light reflect on it. Oh, there we go. I guess I can do that. This is the glowing exhaust trails of engines fueled by matter and antimatter, annihilating each other, illuminate the inner surfaces of 3 ring-shaped interstellar arcs, crossing the ocean of darkness between suns. As envisioned by an aerospace engineer, each vessel rotating enough to create the equivalent of Earth's gravity, carries some 1,600 space pioneers in 4 pairs of habitation towers spaced at intervals along the ship's 29-mile-long perimeter. And spoke-like fuel lines convey hydrogen from the containers mounted on the ship's inner surface. In the outer rings, spoke-like fuel lines convey hydrogen from the containers mounted on the ship's inner and outer rings to the central propulsion hub for annihilation, with stories of anti-hydrogen ice. Traveling with stores of anti-hydrogen ice, traveling at 2% of the speed of light, or 3,720 miles per second. The theoretical velocity of these ships, the fleet would take several generations to journey to another solar system. I get such a spark of hope, inspiration, optimism for our species when I see that there's people dedicating so much time to imagining these things. And then you got people like Elon Musk who are making them into a reality. So this book is broken into several parts. And here is an image from Mars. In an image dominated by the 560-mile-wide Argyre Basin, the tenuous carbon dioxide atmosphere of Mars is scarcely more than a wispy haze on the horizon. It's really cool how you can see the atmosphere of Mars. And we think of it as like a dead planet in an atmosphere like, vacuum on the surface, like the moon, but it actually does have a very light atmosphere in it. I think that the book and the movie The Martian did a really cool job of explaining that, of just conveying what the harsh reality of living on the surface of Mars would entail. So one day in January 1918, and this is why I love history, because you gotta remember, this is Goddard, the guy I was just talking about. We're about to find out what he's doing with his life. But this is 1 year before the end of the Great War, the First World War. And sadly enough, I feel like it takes, and hopefully will, if we're educated enough as a species on our history, and we assimilate our own history and our bloody history into ourselves, we don't need war, things as destructive on a large scale like war, horrifying things, to motivate us to do grand things. But I feel like in the context, this probably was a huge driving force for Goddard at this time. No doubt it had an impact on everybody, what they were doing, but it's amazing during this greatest war, Goddard could be looking up into the stars and projecting his vision for the future. Only 10 years after the Wright brothers invented an airplane. So, in 1918, the young American physics instructor named Robert Goddard gave a friend a collection of unpublished papers he had written on such subjects as solar energy, atomic power, and the avoidance of meteors by travelers in outer space. Goddard, 35 years old at the time, had long been fascinated by futuristic ideas. Growing up in the Boston suburb of Roxbury, Massachusetts, he had devoured Jules Verne's novel From the Earth to the Moon. I haven't read that. Later, after his family had moved to nearby Worcester. God, I'm terrible at pronouncing these names. He had listened rapt as the astronomer Percival Lowell lectured to a local audience on his theory that Mars was populated by highly intelligent beings. But Goddard was more than just imaginative. He possessed practical genius. Before he was out of college, he began experimenting with rockets. In 1914, he was issued 2 patents one for a multi-stage rocket design, and the other for rocket fuel systems that used both liquid and solid propellants, which is, from what I understand, still the baseline technology that even Elon Musk and NASA, of course, uses. Multi-stage designs and solid propellants. During the decades ahead, he would prove himself as a peerless inventor in the field of rocketry.
Robert Goddard, the American rocket pioneer. Yankee inventor, dreamer. They called him the Moon Man and laughed. But on his own, he went ahead designing, inventing, and testing. His first proving grounds were on his Aunt Effie's farm in Auburn, Massachusetts. The neighbors complained.
During the decades ahead, he would prove himself a peerless inventor in the field of rocketry, earning more than 80 patents during his lifetime. 131 were granted posthumously, so a total of 211 patents. Not bad. Now, as he prepared to go to California on a wartime assignment for the government, he handed his papers to his friends for safekeeping. Goddard put the manuscript in an ordinary envelope, which he then placed inside another one that he labeled Special Formulae for Silvering Mirrors. On the inner envelope he wrote, "The notes should be read thoroughly, only by an optimist." Wow. I feel like that's the fundamental character trait that you have to have if you're going to go into the field of astronomy and anything that looks to the heavens rather than down at the earth. I don't know, maybe not. The injunction seemed especially apt for the musings he had titled "The Last Migration." Here, among what he would later refer to as his most extreme speculations, were suggestions for how human beings could make the seemingly impossible journey to vastly distant stars. People could be put in what he described as a state of granular protoplasm that would allow their bodies to withstand low temperatures for long intervals, just as seeds hibernate over winter. A pilot in this deep sleep could be awakened every 10,000 to 1,000,000 years by a radium alarm clock activated by an increase in gas pressure as the radium decayed. Alternatively, generation upon generation of travelers might simply live and die aboard a spaceship or a starship, although Goddard noted, quote, "The characteristics and natures of the passengers might change as millennia passed." I've heard people say that the first tenuous, well, actually I did an episode on Kant's theories and Laplace's and Lagrange's, it was Laplace's theories of galaxies as spiral clumps and clusters of stars back 300 years ago. And then it was first thought of in philosophical terms, in very abstract, speculative terminologies. And then scientists, as our technology and our availability, as our telescope technologies increased, we're able to actually identify the Andromeda Nebula as a galaxy itself, 2 million light years outside of our own galaxy. And there's just a general phrase that the first intimations of a scientific, objective reality are often outlined and felt out in speculative art and philosophy, and this is definitely no exception to that rule. I feel like the people, Elon Musk, I guarantee you Elon Musk read a lot of science fiction as a kid, because you have to have the imaginative framework to be able to conceive all the possibilities, and then out of that pick out the most practical one to be able to implement and create a reality. So it's I love the fusion between imaginative science fiction, futurism, optimism, and hard scientific knowledge and engineering skills to actually make something that's never been made before. It's just really inspiring, I guess. So Goddard did not hazard a guess. He didn't hazard a guess as to when this extraordinary vision of interstellar travel might become a reality. But his paper implied a time far in the future. Today, in part because of the sturdy foundation that he built for the science of rocketry, the notion of journeying out along a series of stepping stones to the stars is a matter of serious scientific discussion. Some people speak of it as a new and infinitely more momentous version of the manifest destiny, which was the phrase applied to America's settlers in their westward expansion, a very religious phrase in the 19th century, in the 1800s. Others cite the eloquent words of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, a Russian school teacher and mathematician who envisioned orbiting space colonies and inspired a generation of scientists with his book Beyond the Planet Earth. And that was published in 1920. Earth, he says Tsiolkovsky. Earth is the cradle of mankind, but one does not live in the cradle forever. Freeman Dyson of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, an eminent theoretical physicist and dreamer about the cosmos, has written of the spreading out of life in all its multifarious forms, from its confinement on the surface of our small planet to the freedom of a boundless universe. It's funny, you'll find little really compact phrases like that. Earth is the cradle, Tsiolkovsky. I need to practice that so I can get better at it. Tsiolkovsky. Earth is the cradle of mankind, but one does not live in the cradle forever. It's definitely childhood's end. And I was probably, I don't know if you guys can see, but so I've had these, well, I guess you can't hear me, but I forgot I got a separate audio microphone going on here. Audio source. So all those books I've had since I started the channel 3 years ago, and I've never, maybe more than once, actually opened these up. It's a whole series I got from some thrift store for like $2 each. And I think doing the Oumuamua, the interstellar comet video the other day made me. There's like 8 different volumes, and this is the only one about interstellar travel, space exploration. So I think there's a theme developing in my thought, in my interests at least. I wouldn't call it thought yet. I'd call it absorption of other people's thought, maybe. But okay, so an expansion of the species. If the testing of these dreams lies out in the far future, then the impulse that drives them can be traced into the deep past, to a time when humanness, or at least the first glimmerings of humanness, revealed itself in the long, entangled drama of life's evolution on Earth. Sometime between 4 and 5 million years ago, a new creature appeared on the open savannas of Africa. This hominid, which would be given the name Australopithecus, or Southern Ape, was destined to be the forebear of the most extraordinary and expansionary. It was expansionary, I just added that. Expansionary of all earthly species, descended from a tree-dwelling line of primates. Australopithecines were small-brained but resourceful enough to use elementary tools of stone and wood. They lived off roots, tubers, insects, and any meat they could find and scavenge on their grassy habitat. By about 1.6 million years ago, the little hominids had given rise to a species called Homo erectus. That would have been weird to do that movement too. The members of this more advanced evolutionary line had a brain size that overlapped the lower end of the range for modern human intelligence. They made sharp-edged tools out of stone, and their primary source of food was big game such as bison. As they traveled in small groups across the savanna, in the tree-dotted grasslands in search of their prey, they steadily expanded their range. This wandering took them far from their ancestral African home, into the warm savannas that stretched hospitably across southern Asia and into southern Europe as well. The roving bands penetrated into radically different environments also. By about 100,000 years ago, humans had begun to move not only into dense rainforests of Central Africa, but also into regions where water was actually scarce, and into the treeless tundras of Europe. In Russia, where big game abounded, the great herds of bison, reindeer, horses, mammoths, mastodons, and other grazing animals, the hominids' great adaptive advantages were intelligence and language. These enabled them to learn and transmit knowledge to their descendants in a very systematic way. No way any previous species had actually ever been able to do. Now, colder lands were conquered by a series of inventions: the controlled use of fire, the fashioning of protective clothing from animal skins, the building of shelter from wood, hides, and animal bones, At the same time, the tribes were gaining new territorial opportunities. With the coming of the last ice age, 79,000 years ago, great quantities of water were locked up in vast ice sheets, causing the level of the oceans to drop by some 300 feet. So all of you living near a coastline like me right now, Florida, I think would be widened by almost 3 or 4 times the width. Because the continental shelf in the ocean recedes at such a shallow gradient. Can you imagine that, all you people near the coast? 300 feet of ocean floor being exposed? I heard that connected England to France, actually. And of course, I'm sure many, many, many islands in the Peloponnesians, Indonesia, and Australia was probably pretty much connected as well. It's really, really cool to think about that. Like, that's not science fiction, that's verifiable, reproducible science discoveries. I don't know what you'd call them. I guess these are from ice core samples in glaciers. But, I don't know. I got a cell phone that can record video and stream my image and sound live over the internet to thousands of views, so I'm inclined to believe scientists. So, but then of course, there's you gotta make sure it's verifiable and reproducible, right? But still, nonetheless, it's fascinating to think about that. Like, philosophers, I don't know, I won't get into that now, but 100 years ago, people speculating about the human species were doing so under the impression that the Earth was maybe 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Maybe more speculative people in the 1800s would think it was maybe a couple million years old. Now we know that it's 3.5 billion years old. So we have to orient our perspectives on our psychology and our innate nature, accordingly to a species that's came about, you and I, and are the current end result of 3.5 billion years of evolution. But nonetheless, perhaps 50,000 years ago, humans dwelling on the coasts of this reclaimed region of Indonesia, actually, I shouldn't skip over it. Indonesia, once an unreachable scattering of islands, became, with this 300-foot sea level drop, an extension of Asia. Perhaps 50,000 years ago, humans dwelling along the coasts of this reclaimed region built simple vessels, rafts most likely, and made their way from island to island to island across the Timor Straits of the continent Australia, which was then a landmass of more than 3 million square miles. Here's a picture of some scientists. I know Dyson was one of them. As one of today's visionaries of the subject of interstellar travel, astrophysicist Freeman Dyson, so he's the guy on the far right, joins the ranks of Russian mathematician Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. No doubt, that's him. Looks very Russian with his beard and cape. The rocket scientist Robert Goddard. Tsiolkovsky conceived of at the turn of the century, Tsiolkovsky conceived of a liquid fuel multi-stage space rocket. 2 decades later, isn't that ironic? I gotta wait for the airplane as I'm talking about aerospace technology. So, Tsiolkovsky conceived of a liquid fuel multi-stage space rocket. 2 decades later, Goddard refined the theory of staging and began testing a series of experimental liquid fuel rockets, one of which reached an altitude of 9,000 feet. And then Dyson over here was a futurist maverick, they call him. A maverick futurist has proposed several schemes using nuclear bombs as to power our expeditions to the stars. So the fallen sea level also created a 1,000-mile-long land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, about 12 to 14,000 years ago. And I love how this is turning into a really broad book. I was going to say talk, but the date, isn't certain. And now they think that there were waves. There were multiple waves in the 15,000-year cyclical ice age, oncoming and melting. But the bands, they think, I don't know when this book was written, but definitely this was one of the second waves, I think, after the original 30,000 years ago waves that came from Siberia into Alaska, and of course, from there spread all the way south. Bands of Siberian hunters followed the herds of grazing animals across the tundra bridge and eventually found a route south where boundless riches lured them further. By 9000 BC, the migrants to the New World had reached the tip of South America, and those who had stopped at intermediate points en route swiftly mastered the demands of life in the mountains, deserts, forests, and grasslands of the Americas. But the epic of human expansion was far from over. One of the most remarkable chapters got underway about 5,000 years ago, when the coastal peoples of southeastern Asia, the ancestors of today's Polynesians, began pressing the bounds of the range in seagoing craft. From the Indonesian and Philippine archipelagos, they traveled along the north shore of New Guinea and settled some small offshore islands. Around 1500 BC, 1500, and within just a few generations, they spread 1,800 miles across the Pacific to inhabit the uninhabited islands of Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. For their blue water journeys, they developed extraordinary navigational skills, determining the latitude by stars overhead, memorizing other stars in fore-aft bearings, means front and back, detecting the presence of land by clouds hanging stationary in the sky, or patterns of bird flight, or the refractive effect islands had on the regular Pacific swell. Their vessels of migration were now huge wooden canoes, double hulls, or fitted with outriggers, which outriggers are huge poles that I guess can act as counterbalances. They're used to stretch fishing line out either off the left or right, the port or starboard sides of the boat, so that they don't get tangled up with the other fishing lines going straight off the back. But they were laden with food, plants that would be cultivated, pigs, chickens, and dogs. Most of the island hopping required Pacific pilgrims to cross no more than 100 or so miles of water, but sometimes they ventured thousands of miles into the unknown before encountering land like Hawaii. And this is so cool. This is kind of weird. It's kind of oddly, what's the word, serendipitous, that I just talked about Oumuamua, which, that's not a coincidence. I specifically picked this book. But right before that, I was talking about Captain Cook. And you guys, a few of you had mentioned what it would be like maybe to do a video. I should, if I felt so inclined, on the actual migration that we're talking about right now. So it's just weird how that works out. In time, the oceanic realm of the Polynesians encompassed a huge triangular area. The corners marked by Hawaii, Easter Island, and New Zealand. That was almost the size of Europe and Asia combined. That's the entire Pacific Ocean. Virtually all of it was ocean, 995 parts in 1,000, according to one estimate. God, the daring, just seriously, the undaunted courage that it would have taken to undertake a voyage like that and just keep going to get to Easter Island. And to imagine going from Asia all the way to Easter Island, and then only at that point, after maybe being 50,000 years, 40, maybe 30,000 years removed from your descendants, your cousins, who had, by another route, by the Siberian route, the land bridge, ended up only a couple hundred miles away from Easter Island, Rapa Nui. So, this next section, called the Ocean of Space, I think I'll probably stop it after this, because I'm reading way slower and adding way more, hopefully, interesting information into it. It's making a lot slower progress than I thought it would. So this is the ocean of space. However daunting the ratio of land to water, it pales in comparison to what the human species faces in the vast ocean of space. All the solid bodies of the solar system, the planets, the moons, and asteroids, together account for no more than an estimated 0.14 zeros and 1 3 at the end of that. So 3 to the negative 10 to the 3 times 10 to the negative 15th. of the spherical volume occupied by the solar family. Yet these are crowded conditions compared to the general galactic neighborhood. The nearest stellar landfall, the 3-star system known as Alpha Centauri, lies 4.3 light years away, or a cool 25 trillion, sorry Carl, kind of beats you, miles from Earth. The next closest sun, Barnard's star, so the next closest sun, Barnard's star, is 5.9 light years away, so close to 50 trillion light years away. To cross the cosmic ocean, even to a body as near as the moon, is an enterprise fraught with difficulties. The continents and islands on planet Earth, however vast may be the expanses of water between them, at least stay in one place for the duration of the journey. Planets, moons, stars, by contrast, move and interact in a ceaseless gravitational dance that requires spacecraft to follow curving, looping trajectories, painstakingly worked out according to Newton's laws of motion. And the hazards go beyond the navigational. Travelers are vulnerable to lethal high-energy particles and radiation that flood space when magnetic storms rage on the sun, and rocky debris from asteroids or comets. Oh, you know what? I could use my Jamaican wand right now to trace. See if my transporter works. All I gotta do is ask, I guess. Alright, let's pretend we're in the future. And let's pretend I have a transporter and a replicator. And this is what would happen. Computer, place my Jamaican wand in my hand right now. Nice. Okay, so should have been doing this the whole time, but so travelers are vulnerable to radiation, especially from solar coronal mass ejections from the storms that rage on the sun, and rocky debris from asteroids and comets zipping along at tens of thousands of miles an hour, which can inflict serious, if not fatal, damage to the hull of a spacecraft. Even mundane concerns can become highly problematic in space. The difficulties of communicating across the void, for instance, and the debilitating effects of living for long periods without the normal tug of Earth's gravity. Yet the urge and the need to reach out for new territory are as strong as they have ever been in the genus Homo. Space, with all its inherent risks and dangers, is the last frontier. Or maybe our minds are, but a physicist wouldn't say that. And you can see here we have different celestial chronometers. They're saying ways to keep track of time using celestial objects like stars and planets, and the sun and moon, of course. So here's that. And it says, since prehistoric times. Do I edit that truck out? I don't know. Since prehistoric times, humans looked into the heavens to mark the natural rhythm of earthly events, the ceaseless turn of day and night, the march of the seasons. Attempts at calendar keeping may date back some 37,000 years ago, when evidence suggests Ice Age hunter-gatherers first recorded the phases of the moon. Wow. Through aeons, efforts to chronicle celestial motions grew increasingly complex as various cultures erected structures whose form and function were patterned on the stars themselves. Here we have 6500 BC. The sequence of notches carved in this Ice Age antler may correspond to lunar phases. The broad end has been fashioned to resemble the head of an animal. So that was 6500 BC, so almost 9,000 years ago. And then 2800 BC, so almost 5,000 years ago, we got Stonehenge. The newly risen midsummer sun gleams above the Heelstone, the center boulder of New England's Stonehenge, whose many lunar and solar alignments are subject to various scientific interpretations. I'll show you that. So there's the 65,000-year-old bone. And Stonehenge. Is that coming into focus? I hope so. Okay. And then just a little bit later than Stonehenge, 2500 to 1400 BC, the Egyptians. An Egyptian tablet depicts the pharaoh left and the goddess Seshat laying out a temple by aligning a cord with the Big Dipper, symbolized by the seven-pointed star Seshat. And then lastly, just about 300 BC, this is a chronicle, so 2,500 years ago almost, Chronicle of the Motions of Mars and Mercury appears in cuneiform script. In this clay Babylonian astronomical diary, one of thousands that recorded planetary and lunar events. Jesus. Actually, as a brief little aside, the astrological symbols based on the 12 constellations is transitioned based on the precession of the equinoxes. You should look that up if you don't know what it is. But the Earth wobbles and creates one full wobble, like a top wobbling, every 26,000 years. And I think roughly 2 full rotations within the zodiac signs complete during that cycle. And from, I think, 2000 BC to the year 0 was the age of Aries. And then from 0 to roughly our age right now, we're about to transition. It was the age of Pisces, or the fish. And right around now, actually, we're during a transition time, which is pretty interesting, that the internet was just discovered, flight, the combustible engine, obviously electricity, atomic energy. A lot of things have been discovered right now. And so anyways, that's one of the big, if not the most significant factors in the reason that you see the fish symbol symbolizing Christianity on the back of cars. You see it a lot. It's because Jesus was the fish bearer. He was the fisher of men. And he ended the age of Aries, which was the lamb. That's why he's the Lamb of God. And began the age of the fish. That's why he was a fisherman. He made friends with fishermen. And he ushered in the age of the fish. Pisces. I thought that was pretty interesting. The original baptism, I guess. I'm reading all this in Carl Jung's book, Ion. The original baptism was meant to be baptized in a fish pond. So, anyways, that's maybe a boring, maybe an interesting, hopefully, side note. I think that's important because our ancestors, way before we had modern technology, even Galileo's telescopes, 1,500, 2,000 years before Galileo, we had people paying very, very close attention to the stars. And obviously, I'm not suggesting there was some voodoo, some mysterious magic happening astrologically, but definitely you can imagine that whatever's going on in our psychology, that's again evolved over 3 billion years, we projected into the closest version of a higher order being that we could easily access, which was the infinitude of the stars. It's so interesting that, like, once you think about it like that, it seems like a natural progression to look up and imagine that wherever a higher being might exist, or whatever it might look like, might be symbolized somehow in the stars. And whatever our ancestors' conception of God, or a God, or whatever, multiple gods might have been, it's kind of a logical progression to think that they would have projected those ideas onto different patterns in the sky, in the night sky, where they see the holes to heaven, And yeah, I don't know. I think there's some stuff there worth considering, even if you don't believe in a God, or at least you say you don't, maybe. Nonetheless, we still want to reach out to the stars. So, I don't know, it's cool. It's interesting. Some questions to think over. And definitely not assume, I definitely don't assume I have any answers. I just think if you're going to ask some profound questions about your life, our history in the stars are two pretty useful places to begin, I think. So, back to the book. So let me put this down for a second. So the urge and need to reach out to the stars for new territory are as strong as they've ever been with our genus, which is Homo. Space, with all its inherent risks and dangers, is the last frontier. In 1961, while the world held its collective breath below, Yuri Gagarin of the Soviet Union became the first human being to brave that airless realm. When he completed a single orbit of Earth. in a craft scarcely large enough for one person. Hope. Guarantee he didn't have claustrophobia. If he didn't, he did after that. Within 3 decades, American astronauts had repeatedly visited the moon, and Soviet cosmonauts had spent as much as a year at a time living in relatively spacious quarters aboard orbiting space stations. Today, the scientists and engineers of several nations are plotting next steps, examining their options for establishing bases on the moon and Mars. And of course, Elon Musk now says that within a couple years we'll be on Mars. Actually, hold on, let me look that up real quick. I mean, we're talking about this, so might as well. So. Let's see if it gives us any dates here. Making life multiplanetary. Elon Musk says, you want to wake up in the morning and think the future will be great. And that's what being a spacefaring civilization is all about. It's about believing in the future and thinking that the future will be better than the past. And I can't think of anything more exciting than going out there and being among the stars. Elon Musk. The guy. Jesus Christ. Let's see. On September 17th, 2018, SpaceX announced fashion innovator and globally recognized curator Yusaku Maezawa will be the company's first private passenger to fly around the moon in 2023. Okay. To date, only 24 people have visited the moon, the last of them flying in 1972. In the first private lunar passenger flight, featuring a flyby of the moon as part of a week-long mission, will help fund development of SpaceX's Starship and Super Heavy rocket, formerly known as the BFR, an important step in enabling access for everyday people. I mean, let's be honest, not everyday people, who dream of flying to space and also have about 10 zeros in their bank account. But nonetheless, I mean, damn, that is cool. In here, I guess I'll move the camera, not the computer. Here's a depiction. So there's Elon's planned trajectory around the moon right there. He's going to start at Earth, make a couple very precisely timed burns, and loop around the moon. I guess orbit it for a few weeks. No, I guess it's a pass. And there's my really, really eclectic, that's a nice way of putting it, room. Okay. Anyways, yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think large-scale endeavors like that are going to really orient us back to reality. There's probably going to be something bad that happens along one of these missions. Hopefully not. I really, really hope not. But if every human being is as optimistic as Elon, I think we'll be alright. Alright. Okay, so Yuri Gagarin. We're going to go to Mars. Yeah, so it didn't say anything about Mars, but that's because I didn't scroll down far enough. Jesus. Oh, sorry, okay. Our aspirational goal on SpaceX.com/Mars is to send our first cargo mission to Mars in 2022. So a year before sending that fashion designer to the moon. Very cool. Really, really cool. So considering prospects for piloted journeys to asteroids and or satellites of our outer planets, and studying the feasibility or departing the solar system altogether and sailing out across the cosmos to planets circling other stars. Their deliberations range from detailed engineering studies involving known technologies, such as the construction of a space station in low Earth orbit that will serve as a staging ground for subsequent journeys, all the way to projects far more speculative, such as life support systems for interstellar trips lasting thousands of years. That's awesome. Alright guys, well this lasted quite a bit longer than I thought it would, so we're gonna close it there, and my phone's about to die. So that's usually a good indicator that I've recorded way longer than I originally intended, but hopefully it helped you guys hang out for a little while, relax, zone out, focus, maybe just hearing me stammer on about our future as a human species in a very optimistic bent, I hope you thought. And yeah, I don't know, I just love talking about this stuff, so if you guys enjoyed too, let me know in the comments. Let's start a discussion, and I really, really do rely on you guys a lot of times to help me. I got these books, but to orient me, to direct me towards interesting information like Scoop, you telling me about Oumuamua, which I think I might have swiped past or something, but I didn't know about it, so it's super cool. I love that you guys are interested in the same things as me. So yeah, with that, just shoot me a comment if you like this, and we'll continue it. This book doesn't seem that thick, but we only made it through like 3 pages, so there's a lot more content where that came from. But let me know what's up, and if you liked it, and I'll see you next time, hopefully. Alright guys, take care, sleep well, be good to yourself, and happy holidays. I'm just going to say that this whole month of December. But alright, bye. I'll see you next time.